get things going. I want to welcome everybody to this sort of our first virtual presentation about Willing Hands and what we're doing. The focus being volunteer opportunities, but because I assume some people are not totally familiar with Willing Hands in general, I figured we could use this as a way to introduce our mission and programs and what we're doing these days, which is a little different, not entirely, but the different adaptations I had to adjust to. So a little bit of sort of rule setting, if we can try and stay muted unless you have a question, but the chat feature, there's a little chat symbol that you can open up and type in any questions you have as you go or things that you want to return to. We're going to keep kind of track of questions so that we can try and cover them toward the end with a question answer. Unless you want to have your video on, I think it's probably best to just turn it off. That way connections are more streamlined for everybody and we can just focus on the slides. So I have a number of slides I'm going to show. And then we should have some time for questions at the end specific to things we talked about or other stuff I forget to bring up, because that'll probably happen. So with that, let's see. A little bit about history. So Willing Hands is in our 16th year, and it began by a produce manager at Hanover the co-op food stores in Hanover was just noticing lots of very usable food going to waste, getting thrown out every day. And so he sort of approached the management of the store, asked if he could take that food, and I think first was bringing it over to the Haven, but found organizations that were very grateful to get it and distribute it to people in need. A board formed really quickly, and the nonprofit Willing Hands was created. And in the first 6 months of its existence, 50 tons of food were recovered from the waste stream, usable food, and delivered to about 20 different organizations. So really fast. Obviously, there was a big need that needed to be filled. And our concept has remained the same. It's pretty simple. We recover most of the food that we distribute that would otherwise have been thrown out. We focus on only perishable, fresh, unprocessed foods. We do distribute some dairy, meats, and we're doing more of that these days as there's a rising need for all kinds of perishable food. But we sort of let the food shelves and the other places we distribute still source, the shelf-stable foods that are kind of more typical that at food drives, canned vegetables and things like that. So we're doing the fresh stuff and filling that kind of gap that falls within the charitable food system. The impacts of what we're doing is the goals really are to reduce food waste, like I was talking about, alleviate hunger. So really trying to just put as much reliable source of food out there for people who need it, and really focus on healthy, nutritious food. So we're not distributing the Little Debbie's cakes and things. We're looking at the fresh and often locally grown foods that are in the area that are pretty pricey. If you go into the co-op, it's not something that's very accessible for a lot of people. The food waste issue is huge. Studies show that, something like over a third of the food that is produced in the US or globally is thrown out. It never reaches anyone's plate. Or in the sense of, farms, it's just not harvested if the market's not there. We've been hearing a lot in the news about farmers, because of the craziness of our food system, having to just, till in perfectly good beans and the dairies are dumping milk. And it's, it's kind of it's a huge tragedy. But Willing Hands is really trying to combat that in a local way. The disparity in income, and the people with the most wealth tend to, eat more healthy diets or can at least afford healthy food, but they also throw away the most food. They're not as careful, and that just gets to the equity of the sort of food justice nature of what we're trying to do, is to just make fresh, nutritious food really accessible in a reliable way. Reducing food waste is a really big factor when you think about climate change, and Project Drawdown is this sort of looks at the global systems and tries to figure out which are the most effective climate solutions, and actually reducing food waste has risen to the third most effective strategy according to their research. We had an informal study done by a professor at Dartmouth and one of his students that showed in net, by looking at all of the food that Willing Hands was recovered that was headed for the waste stream, and then, you know, deducting out what we have to spend on gasoline for shipping all that food around the Upper Valley, and heating our building, and, you know, running the refrigerators, which are huge in our new warehouse, we still had reduced CO2 emissions by about 443 tons as when 2019 numbers. So it's major, and one of the things that, you know, if people want to have climate impacts, reducing the food waste and supporting organizations like Willing Hands is a big benefit. The food waste issue is right on every farm. It's not due to anything of, you know, farmers' fault. It's market driven often. It's not economical for them to harvest every little thing. But a study in, I think it was, 2016, looked at Vermont statewide and found that about 14.3 million pounds of vegetables and berries grown in Vermont are just go uneaten. So they're neither sold nor donated. Sometimes they're harvested, but sometimes they're just left in the field. So that's where gleaning comes in. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. Toward the need. So what does hunger look like in the Upper Valley? It is everywhere and often hidden. Before 2020, because there's this big pandemic caveat to everything, about 1 in 10 people in the Upper Valley were living in food insecure households. So that just really means they don't have regular access to nutritious food, the foods that make up a healthy diet. It can be, you know, 11 months of the year, they are pretty set, but you know, once a week or once every couple weeks, they don't really know where their next meal is coming from. And when people struggle with hunger, they have to make choices between paying for food and other necessities, transportation costs to get to work, healthcare needs, heating, rent. And food is often the most flexible of those costs. And so people will cut back on food. They'll eat less, or they will purchase things that are cheaper and usually, you know, high calorie, but not really very nutritious. So Willing Hands feels like that's a big, and you know, we all recognize that fresh organic fruits and vegetables that we all love to have are not very cheap. So this study I found that it was about $550 more per person per year to have more of a full diet of fruits and vegetables. So that's really our goal, make it as easy to access the fresh, healthy food on a consistent basis. And when we are looking at things today, the health of everybody is paramount. And even before sort of the issues coming up with COVID, poor diet has been shown by the Vermont Department of Health to be one of 3 behaviors. So that's with lack of exercise and tobacco use thrown in there, that leads to 4 chronic diseases that cause 50% of all deaths. So when you think, if we can fix diet, like we could go a long way to, you know, improving lifespans and just overall well-being of so many people. So then we hit the spring. Research by UVM and Johns Hopkins researchers, well, they actually did a statewide survey in Vermont and found that food insecurity went up by 33% in Vermont in just kind of the first 4 weeks of the pandemic. So that survey was showing that nearly 1 in 4 Vermonters was experiencing food insecurity. So answering the questions that the USDA has that sort of assess whether people are reaching that threshold of food insecurity. So that's 1 in 4 people, and that is really significant when we look at what we have to kind of work towards. Willing Hands has been here, and we are still here, and we want to help. So our fresh food deliveries have been reaching about 5,000 people every week, all year long. There are gleaning and food recovery organizations that really focus their efforts during the summer season. And because that's a lot of infrastructure limitations, to be able to store food and source food year round in these northern reaches of the country is challenging. but it's one of the things Willing Hands believes is super important. So, and about, as you can see, unique individuals each year. This map kind of gives you a sense of our reach. Obviously, we're very focused in the Lebanon, Hartford, Hanover, Norwich area. That's the population center and also the business center, but we go all the way up toward, we source from a lot of other places beyond this map, but the places that we're delivering food to are shown in those orange and yellow stars, are the food shelves and other recipient organizations. So who are those recipient organizations? They range: food shelves, senior centers, homeless shelters, other support systems that serve people that are in these vulnerable populations. 9 out of 10 of these organizations do not have another source of fresh fruits and vegetables. It's all from Willing Hands. And we did a survey a couple of summers ago of the actual consumers of the food, and 91% of them, sort of unsurprisingly, said that, you know, the food that they receive through Willing Hands helps them maintain a healthier diet, save money, or do both of those things. This is, you know, Senior Center in Royalton and Cornish, New Hampshire, which look a bit different right now. We've had to adapt a lot of these types of food distribution points because of the health crisis, but gives you a sense on the types of food we're delivering and the folks that are really reliant on it. It's a social setting for a lot of people, or had been, so people came out. In addition to the seniors, 1 in every 4 people receiving food from Willing Hands is under 18. And families with many children are more susceptible to food insecurity. So we try and spread it out. This is a One for All family space in Claremont. Romano Circle's a family housing site in Lebanon that's public subsidized. Again, the seniors, so another quarter or more of the people getting Willing Hands food are seniors. The VA Medical Center sets up a sort of free farmers market with what Willing Hands provides every week. Maple Manor is one of the senior low-income housing sites in Lebanon. The Earl Borden Center in Claremont. There's Rogers House, another one in Lebanon. Gives you a sense where we're going. Kind of harping on the point, but it's consistent and reliable service of this type of food that makes it really effective and what we're striving for. So Willing Hands drivers are delivering 358 days per year. The days that we're closed are major holidays that the co-op food stores are closed. This is a little text heavy, but I've thrown together a little bit of the information that we've gleaned from the past couple months looking at last spring in comparison. Some of the changes we've had to make have been significant, but they were made quickly and effectively, and we're still delivering food. So we've delivered actually 13,000 pounds more than we did during this period last year. This is looking at the period between about mid-March, when everything sort of shut down, and the first week in May. We added 4 new organizations to receive regularly, and we've amended the protocols and locations for 3 others that had to close due to volunteers being able to maintain those recipient areas. We also have volunteers and staff who've been organizing check-ins with all of our organizations on a weekly basis and keeping kind of a running list on needs, connecting them to resources if Willing Hands isn't the one to sort of cover those. We're a member of Upper Valley Strong, and so we're really connected with the other groups like the Haven and Listen and childcare support and the mask makers and people who are stepping up to do all kinds of things for people in need these days. And even beyond the Upper Valley, there have been a few places outside of our network that we're connecting to resources, the places on the outskirts that are still pretty tied into the Upper Valley. Volunteers. This is the first spring we've actually had a facility, so that made a huge difference in us being able to get volunteer participation in certain things like packing food bags and gleaning or sorting through last year's gleaned apples and getting some that were better for baking, unsorted out from the ones that we could distribute fresh still. And so we've seen a tenfold increase in volunteer participation, even with so many people staying home and a lot of our regular volunteers unfortunately unable to come out. We miss them dearly, but we are still getting work done, and we have lots that they will be able to do once it's safe for them to do so. But we have had to change our protocols a bit. You can see there's masks, gloves, distancing. Families and couples who are able to help out can obviously do tasks closer together. And so that tends to be something that's a benefit for everyone. But even those, we're able to do a lot, and we've been doing all kinds of volunteer group sessions, keeping the group sizes to 10 and below. But yeah, and just getting the word out and people's interest in learning how they can help. We've had, a fivefold increase in volunteer registration. So getting on our mailing lists so that you know about opportunities that come up, and if some happen to be of interest and also fit your schedule, then it's easy to sign up. Getting back a little bit to where we get the food that we deliver. So a lot of you are probably interested in hearing about gleaning, and that's one of the options that we have. We also year-round pick up from the co-op food stores, like I mentioned, 2 to 3 times a day, pretty much all week long. Upper Valley Produce, other big producers like Vermont Hydroponics, Pete and Jerry's for organic eggs, Cabot Creamery is a new donor. But those are sources of food that we're distributing year-round and picking up year-round. Local farms, now that the season's getting going, sometimes have surplus of certain things that they're not going to be selling. Imperfect produce, the stuff that's just cosmetically not ideal to put out on store shelves. We get CSA shares from a number of farms, and we've actually upped that significantly this year with people donating money so that we can buy full shares from farms like Sunrise Farm in Hartford, Sweetland Farm, Crossroad, Honeyfield Farm is a new farm in Norwich, Route 5 and Fairleigh. We're looking forward to lots more partnerships like that to support local agriculture, as well as the people who otherwise wouldn't have access to the best fresh produce from these CSAs. Let's see. Yeah, so then we get to gleaning, and gleaning is, to define it, the practice of, getting out into the farmer's fields after the regular harvest is over and gathering the usable food so that others can benefit from that. This is at Cedar Circle Farm. Willing Hands is part of the Vermont Gleaning Collective, which is a group of gleaning organizations throughout the state of Vermont. We also participate in New Hampshire Gleans, so we have the benefit of kind of comparing and sharing the different successes that the different groups have, just because we're spanning the river between the two states. Some examples of gleaning. Here's some early season carrot gleaning, and so the scale. About 25 tons of food in 2019 were gleaned that otherwise would have been left in the fields, which is pretty impressive. And people come out again and again, become regular gleaners at certain locations that are their favorites, or others, come out when they can, even if it's sort of scattered across the Upper Valley. We have a number of locations that are pretty steady, Crossroad Farm being one of them in Post Mills. But we have 13 farms and orchards and a couple private orchards recently that have let us know that they have produce they're not going to be harvesting, and we can have volunteers come harvest it for Willing Hands. Share some other photos of some of our gleaning farm partners. Edgewater Farm is in Plainfield. Cedar Circle Farm again, Thetford. Green Dragon Farm is down near Ascutney, Wethersfield area. Hill Farm used to be a pick your own blueberry operation, but when that ceased, the owner very generously let Willing Hands have groups of volunteers to pick all of the blueberries every season up in Enfield, corner of Enfield and Plainfield. Again, a picture of Crossroad Farm. They're a food donor. They donate surplus. We get some CSA funds from Crossroad, and we also glean every Tuesday throughout the season, pretty much from them. Once apples come in, Whitman Brook Orchard and Riverview Farm have been great partners letting us do regular apple gleanings in their orchards. And apples, now that we have a facility, we've been able to store them through the winter and continually distribute. We used to have to turn away the offers for apples because we had no place to keep them. So now that we do, it's pretty amazing. In addition to food recovery and gleaning, we also have gardens, and these have also expanded recently. The largest is in Thetford at Cedar Circle Farm. They're our host and also a huge partner in resources, starting seeds, managing the fields, irrigation, all kinds of stuff that helps when someone's more on site. But our volunteers are the ones that are doing all the labor, and it's pretty impressive how much food they've grown. This is the side view of our new facility in Norwich, where we've tilled up, I don't know, Jim can correct me, about a ½ acre, and growing food there. Last season was our first, so it was, you know, not super productive, but this year we're already well on our way to growing more, mostly storage crops and things that will be really long lasting in this garden, and building up the soil productivity with cover crops and things, because we want it to be a good long-term investment in what food we can grow and manage ourselves with volunteers. We also partner with Dartmouth Hitchcock. We created last year a pharmacy garden, and this helps DH employees become engaged with food security. It also is part of the hospital's overall food as medicine program, and their goals to eventually have a food shelf within the hospital that has, in part, some food that's grown right on site, but also fresh, healthy, perishable food from willing hands and other sources. We do a lot of group events for gleaning as well as gardening. Schools and businesses and clubs have all come out in the past many years, but last year was a big surge in engaging a lot of groups, and we hope to be able to do that. I had talked a little before more of the meeting started. The group things are a little, they look different than these nice pictures of everyone sort of with their arms around each other, but it's still going to be possible, and we're looking forward to a good season. Those that are not coming out and doing stuff in groups or spending a lot more time at home than we are used to, we have a Grow a Row program, which is essentially just encouraging home gardeners to plant a little bit extra. Or if you've never gardened before, start a garden up and maybe, you know, plant an extra row that you would intend to donate. And we take these donations throughout the season. When people harvest, they can drop them right off, contactless drop off at our facility in Norwich. And then we can distribute that fresh food to our partners who serve people in need. So this is from the spring, nothing green and growing quite yet, except all the little seedlings. But we did, because we have a facility, have apples that lasted throughout the winter and were still really good. We did have to sort through some of the bad ones that got in there. But this is an example kind of behind our facility. We set up a few stations, people stayed apart, but got a lot sorted out that could then more easily be distributed on our weekly and daily runs. We've gotten a lot of eggs from Pete and Jerry, but they come in these big flats that are harder for us to bring out to food shelves, so volunteers help repack them into cartons. And some of our food shelves now are these distribution sites that essentially invite people to drive through, open their trunk, a bag of food or produce will be put in the back, and then, you know, the volunteers close it up and they head out. So repacking some of our, what had been crates that people would pick through on their own, we're now bagging into sort of family-sized helpings for these distribution sites. This is this year in our garden out at Cedar Circle with volunteers. You know, these sessions have been ongoing since earlier than we ever have. And this year has been pretty exciting because, you know, we've got a good jump on things, and even with this challenging weather, we're hoping for good production and really good engagement of people in all of the gardens and farms. I think this is getting toward the end, so we're looking for volunteers specifically in the Bradford area because we are hopeful that a few partner farms we've reached out to and had sporadic opportunities in the past will have something more regular. And so one of the things that hopefully will come out of this meeting, if people are interested in signing up to be volunteers and be kind of on call for the times when we hope we'll be able to do blueberry gleaning and strawberry picking and things like that for willing hands. So yeah, that's one of the main goals here, as well as to give people a little bit more information on the background and how things are running these days. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, and I can leave this up here if people want to jot that down. We are recording this so people can share this with people who weren't able to make it in the past. Or today, I mean. So I think with that, I can open it up. If people want to ask their questions, you can just unmute yourself, or I think Ashley was helping me monitor questions a little bit. So if there are some that have come through the chat, maybe Ashley, you can chime in with those.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, in the chat box, I also put the link to Willing Hands website, and one of the first questions, which Jim kind of touched on in the chat box, that came up was, what was the distribution range? Or what was the geography area?
Okay, yeah, I can go back to that map. So generally we serve an area that's about 40-mile radius of Norwich, like our facility. And so that reaches out to, I'm losing it here. Oh, that's because I have all these windows open. Let's find it. Yeah.
And Jim also mentioned that you not only cover the area that you've covered on that map, but you also partner with another organization that's closer to central Vermont in order to expand.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So when we've had surplus during the summer, especially if there's a, bumper crops of kale, and we have lots of kale and all the food shelves are like, great, we have plenty of kale. There's a group called the Community Harvest of Central Vermont, is probably what Jim was referring to. And they kind of go from right up in the northwest part of our service area and then toward Montpelier in the central Vermont region. And they're a gleaning organization, but have, distribution to all the food shelves and different sites in that area. So we do that. We will share access with other partners, even the big ones like Vermont Food Bank, New Hampshire Food Bank. We get food from both of those entities, but we also distribute out to them to broaden the reach of a lot of, especially the local produce that comes in, or if we end up with, pallets of eggs and dire need in some of those places, we can definitely share, because we get it all out to our recipients and then go from there.
Thanks, Sarah. The next question is, do you distribute everything you collect weekly? And if not, how do you manage the food that isn't distributed or isn't able to be distributed?
Right. So no, when we were smaller, a lot of it was stuff came on the truck and stuff went off the truck, and there was very little storage capacity. Though we did have a single bay garage with essentially an insulated room that was cooled to about 40-ish degrees, by this little instrument called a cool bot. And so the cool bot could hold some stuff for distribution throughout like a week or two, but generally the volumes were such that we would essentially pick it up, recover it, and then distributed it out. Right now we have our new facility that I've mentioned. Last summer we installed 12,000 cubic feet of refrigerated storage. So that's been organized in a way now that the things that are longer storing, we also have the warehouse. So for things like winter squash and potatoes that don't have to actually be, in the coolers the whole time, can be out. So the management of it, our operations staff are constantly doing the shifting of which is going in first and which is coming out, and what distribution volumes go to each organization. We keep really close track of the weights that we collect and then the weights that we distribute and the types of crops that are most desired by certain organizations. So it's all this very intricate system, and we have staff devoted just to figuring all of that out. So hopefully that answers the question, but our capacity has gone up significantly. So we can now store food that does keep for a lot longer to make sure that the consistency year round is as close to, you know, 1 to 1 to 1 as we can make it. We've always had a little bit of a dip in the winter because those long storing things tend to kind of peter out right before the growing season starts again. But with our partnerships with the co-op and the big, you know, produce wholesalers, we can usually keep fresh food getting to our organizations all year long.
Sarah, there's a question about sort of a community day of gleaning. And I just wanted to sort of address that, it's a, yes, we could probably do it as a community. No, it's also tough. Right now, we're limiting our groups to just 10 and would probably keep that going. We might be able to, gleaning is so weather dependent that we would need to necessarily sort of have everybody register and sign a waiver and such. But we could possibly, if you organized a group, then we could set up for something like blueberries, we could set up different time slots to do 10 at a time. But right now, we're limited to that sort of number of 10 per volunteer session. If that answers Jennifer's question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so one of the things we kind of envisioned in an ideal situation, thinking about maybe a Bradford or Bradford area, or in any of our areas really, we've thought about this down in sort of the Windsor area as well in Vermont, getting sort of a glean team together. So volunteers led by one of our Willing Hands staff or sort of a volunteer leader really, ideally, to be in touch with Willing Hands and in touch with potentially the farmers that would have surplus, to know, to really be the ears and the eyes in the local community with the farmers, sort of finding out what is, when things are ready and what is available. Because one of the big things, once gleaning season hits, as Jim kind of touched on, the weather is finicky and the crops are doing different things and farmers are super busy. And so being able to just stop by the farm and just pick the ear of the farmer for 5 minutes is sometimes the only way to get in touch with them, to find out what's coming down the pipeline. And then if there's a core of volunteers who are fairly flexible but ready to help when the call is made, that's sometimes the best way to get things going. And if it's something like blueberries, Jim and I have been talking, you know, it's a little labor intensive. They're small fruits and you can spend a lot of time out there and there's still plenty left to get. So arranging almost a community week of gleaning or a few weeks when it's blueberry season, to have series of teams go out, you know, every other day or every third day to try and pick as many as the farmer offers really. So they'll point out the rows and say, here's what I suggest, and then we can go to it. So signing up and on our volunteer website and being sort of in that on-call group for particular areas is going to be really helpful. There's any other questions we've maybe missed?
That's all that we have in the text or the chat box so far.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to be able to kind of let people know what farms we're hoping to work with in the area. They're the ones I've mentioned already are regular partners, and we're still not positive about a couple, whether they're going to have surplus. The farms are themselves trying to figure so much out this season. So once we have some actual events that we're being invited to bring volunteers out to glean, we'll be able to, share that really widely. But at this point, they don't want to be seen as turning their back on us if something comes up that's sort of beyond their control. So we're hopeful, but there's some right in your community, then everyone there is gonna know.
Sarah, is there a way for folks to sign up as like a potential volunteer or be on some sort of list where they can be contacted by you?
Yeah, I will put in the chat box sort of our link to our gleaning and gardening webpage, because that's basically the best site to sort of find out a bunch of information about those types of volunteer opportunities. And if you go to that site and then find the tab, the volunteer button, it gives you information about generally what volunteers need to know, but also has a place where you can register to volunteer. So if you click that button, there's a short form that you fill out. It asks you for a password, but just something really simple you can remember, because it's only about changing contact info if you have to. But you can check off interests, like I'm interested in gardening, I'm interested in the pharmacy garden if you work in Lebanon, say, or gleaning. You can just select gleaning, and you will get information about gleans that happen sort of throughout the Upper Valley. But the tab on that website that says opportunities is a calendar that we update pretty much every week, or if pop-up gleans come on, and those will show a site and a time on the calendar. And so you can kind of monitor that for places in your area. But the best way to find out is to kind of get our weekly update with things that we know are on the horizon, with a direct link to signing up for them. Because we do need volunteers to register for our events, especially now that we have to limit sizes and be able to contact people ahead of time if weather or other circumstances change the day and time we've been planning on. So that's the best way to get on our mailing list for volunteer opportunities. You can also email me. I'm just Sarah with no H at Willing Hands, but it's also volunteer@willinghands.org. If any questions about volunteering or registering, or if you're interested in something outside the realm of gardening and gleaning, we definitely love to hear from people who have other skills or interests or availabilities.
We might just talk about the weekly gleans that are already set up. Some are maybe not from this area. So there, again, we usually do some early on. The orchards are usually later in the afternoon. The vegetable gleanings are usually in the morning. So Tuesday morning at 7:30, usually we're at Crossroads. That will start late June or early July. So Tuesdays is Crossroads. Wednesday we'll be down in Norwich at Honeyfield Farms, also in the morning. Wednesday afternoon, again, is Route 5 farm, but may start slowly. It's sort of our first year with both of those. Thursday, we are down at Edgewater Farm in Plainfield. That's Thursday morning. And Friday, we will try to do Cedar Circle in the afternoon, and that time hasn't been set yet. The orchards then come in. August is sort of blueberry, late July, early August is blueberry season at Hill Farm, which is out in sort of Enfield area. And then Whitman Brook starts late August or early September with apples. So those are sort of our go-to gleans. And then as we hear from other farms, we just do pop-up gleans at times.
Thank you, Jim. That's helpful.
So there's one more question that popped up that is a good one in case we have some families on here. But is there an age requirement? Like, does someone have to be a certain age in order to participate?
Yeah, it's definitely not a hard and fast requirement, but especially for gleaning. So we're being invited onto these farms that are commercial enterprises. And so I know definitely with the work from home when you have kids is challenging, or the volunteer with your kids is a really positive thing. So we like to encourage that, but at this point, I believe our cutoff right now is 14 for gleaning, and Jim can correct me, but that's sort of the age at which, you know, it's easy to follow the rules. There's more rules now, unfortunately, with COVID that have to be adhered to. We like to encourage families with kids to help us out in the gardens, but again, it's sort of the kid has to be able to follow and keep, you know, working under masked conditions and with social distancing and things like that. So it's a little more challenging these days, but yes, we have a bit of a cutoff for the age of kids, but we do encourage anyone with, you know, young teens to high schoolers to, you know, college kids. They're always welcome to join us. We just need waivers from parents if they're under 18.
And again, it really will depend on the farm and the permission from the farmer. Farms that are used to having pick your own and with families coming are more used to having young kids there and sort of are set up for that. So it is, as Sarah said, sort of not a hard and fast rule there, and it just again depends on the farm. So it's great. I would still sign up, and then as you hear of the opportunity, you can ask directly whether this is a farm that would allow a 13-year-old, as I see, or
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, feel free to email or call. Yeah, mainly email is easiest for us to get wherever we happen to be, but any questions like that, we can work on it. Great. Does anyone else have any other questions that they want to share or things I covered in the slides you wanted me to go back to? We really appreciate everyone coming out. I also wanted to thank the Space on Main for hosting, and Little Rivers Health Clinic. We had sort of envisioned a presentation in person with all of you, you know, maybe even have a little pizza party, kind of social hour, but unfortunately this is what the presentation turned into, for better or worse, because now we can share it with other people, and we'll have the link available for people to pass along if you know of others who might be interested in learning more about this. Yeah, we're grateful to be able to share with you this way, and thank you to the hosts who helped me put this together. So yeah, we appreciate it. I hope everyone can get the rest of this beautiful day. Again, if you have other questions, please feel free to reach out, and we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in person.
See you.
All right, bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Jim and Willing Hands and Space on Main.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.